Hey everybody, today we have Nasheed Sabree from Rover Consulting. He's going to give us some Tableau dashboard design tips. Hopefully, you guys can learn something new. How you doing, man?
Doing pretty good. Thanks for having me.
Cool. No problem. All right, so tell me about your Tableau journey. How'd you get into all this?
Well, my Tableau journey started in 2011, so it's a little while after I graduated. Essentially, I was working in a nonprofit. We're doing a lot of work in Excel. And a friend of mine
got out of that quick, huh?
Yeah. I had to. It took me a little while, but Tableau helped with a lot of that. So I discovered Tableau. I was like, we're doing a lot of things the hard way, and so I started to show the team some of the things we could do in Tableau. Needless to say, Tableau became the most attractive thing on my resume from then on. And that kind of opened up doors for me going forward.
Cool. So where you at now with things? So you started there, and what was kind of the progress?
So I was at the nonprofit for about 3 years. I went back and got my master's, and then from there I transitioned to Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, which is a nonprofit as well, but they make a ton of money. But so that's healthcare. From there I went to Pulte Group, which is a home builder. They built homes nationwide. From there I went on to be a manager at Focus Brands, which is a parent company of some of the popular brands that I'm sure you've heard of: Moe's, McAllister, Schlotsky's Deli. And they have some snack brands: Auntie Anne's, Carvel, Cinnabon.
And you Tableau through all those?
Tableau everywhere. So like I said, Tableau is
just set up, sticking with it, huh?
that was the thing. And it's funny, like when I first started with Tableau, I thought I knew a lot. But Tableau is a tool that you're always learning. It's always changing. As soon as you think you know something, that trick becomes, antiquated, and it's like, okay, it's time to learn something new. So Tableau the whole way. From there, I went on to do a lot of consulting work, ADP, there are a ton of different companies, Kellogg, Kraft, McKesson. I've seen a lot, done a lot.
How did you get into the consulting?
So after Focus Brands, there was an opportunity for me to do some independent contracting work, which was a new world for me. And then once I actually discovered it, I realized, okay, it's an opportunity out here to actually go about finding clients on my own, identifying opportunities to kind of support them and help them do things a lot better. So I always put it like this. A lot of companies purchase new tools. I'll just say tools, Tableau being one of them. And I always look at it like purchasing a sports car. You go and purchase a sports car and you use it to just drive to the grocery store and back. And then it's like, okay, well, if you actually had a race car driver drive that car, they'll show you a whole lot more than what you'll be able to do just driving back and forth to the store. So I think about it like that. It's like, if you're going to invest in tools, invest in resources to actually know how to use the tool so that you can have an accurate assessment of what that tool can actually do before you say, oh, well, Tableau can't do this or Tableau. I had a lot of clients, who say that. It's like, well, we tried Tableau, we set it down because it couldn't do this, so now we're trying to go a different direction. I'm like, you all just had the wrong person driving the car.
It's hard to Google stuff for Tableau. You know what I mean? Like problems, like, oh, how do you solve this? I mean, there's a million different solutions. So you just got to figure it out. So there's really haven't been too many things that I haven't been able to manipulate to get Tableau to do it. Exactly. Even though if it's just floating stuff or tricking stuff to look like something, I usually always figure out a way. It's just having that problem solving skills and the creative thinking to get there. But a lot of people, like you said, a lot of people just kind of quit. Like, oh, Tableau can't do it. Like, I mean, they can't do it, but I could do it.
Right.
I can make it work.
Precisely.
So that's cool. All right, and what you doing now?
So right now I'm a VP of Analytics at Rover Consulting. We're based out of Atlanta, Georgia. We have a number of clients, Chick-fil-A being one of them, Mars, Kaiser Permanente. We have a number of clients that we actually work with, and I'm excited about our growth and looking forward to the future.
Nice. All right, good story. All right, so let's talk about. So remember, this is all dashboard design tips and tricks, right? So when you get a client, especially since you do consulting, right? Somebody just throws you some data, they'll be like, do it, right? What's kind of your process? When you get the data, what's kind of talk through like how you get to the final product?
Great question. So essentially, the way we start the way I've actually really taught my team to approach it is really understanding what questions is the client trying to answer. Because in every situation that I've come across, there is a reason for the dashboard build. Otherwise, we wouldn't actually get the opportunity to do it. So we start with a set of questions. And one of the questions is, what are you trying to understand from this dashboard? And then I always think about it in terms of a hierarchy. So it's like, once you answer that question, then what? So you kind of go through this process to understand what your client is looking for in the data. And then I try to basically guide them towards a design that helps them answer not only the first question, but the subsequent question. So once you understand what it is they're looking for, because if you get a data set, it's okay, I see some things that are interesting. But once I understand, okay, you want to understand it just for clarity at a regional level. Okay, then what? Then I want to zero in on what's happening at the state level. Okay, then what? Then I want to understand what's happening year over year. Okay, then what? It's like, okay, well, if I see something happening year over year, I want to look at it month over month. I want to try to look for seasonality. Then I want to zero in on products. So you can't look at all of that at once. Some people just throw everything on the dashboard, say, hey, it's all there, filter, filter, filter. Yeah. But if you don't design it in a way that makes it easy and guides the user through it, so think of it in terms of user experience, user interface design, then you're not going to really get use out of it. Some people say, hey, I gave you everything and I dropped 20 filters on the right. It's like, you might as well give them the table, right? The static table. If that's the case, give them Excel and say, here, create a pivot table and filter. But I always think about it in terms of, think of it as like interface design, application design. So I draw a lot of inspiration from like good websites, well-designed websites, applications, things like that. So start off with one answer, and then allow the user to kind of digest that, and then go to the next level down, and then the next level down. So,
and that's hard for a lot. Like, I just had a call with a client, and a lot of my calls I sound like an asshole because I'm like, give me what's your goal. The goal, and you should be able to tell me in 1 to 2 sentences, right? And then everything on that dashboard is answering that goal, because otherwise they'd be like, well, yeah, I want this, but I also want this. I'd be like, all right, that's another dashboard then. Like we're solving one goal at a time, and it's hard to get them to wrap their head around. But like they'll say something like, oh, we'll go through the columns, right? And I'll be like, all right, how does this column answer the question that you just said? I don't know, but I want to filter it. Like, no, then we don't need it, right? And because they want, like you said, they want everything on one thing, and I'd be like, that's not how this works. Like, we're gonna do each theme is a new dashboard, and we'll answer different questions for each one. Don't try to just throw everything on one. And it's really hard to get clients to wrap their head around it. And then sometimes like they're looking at me like, man, you lucky I paid you up front, because probably wouldn't be working with you, because a lot of like I'm on them like, all right, no, like I'm you got to tell me why you need this. If you can't tell me why you need it to answer this question, then it's not going on there, right?
Right.
Because or else it just becomes this mess, and it's just like, all right, yeah, it answers 20 questions, but it's like, why, so yeah, that's a good thing. All right, so what about like layout and all that? So you got the business goals, then where do you go from there?
So then it's a matter of what's the most important thing. So I draw inspiration in terms of design. Design, I always say, is one of the toughest pieces, at least for me, when it comes to Tableau dashboards. Functionality and making Tableau do nice things and do things that people didn't imagine it could do. I could do a lot of that, parameter actions, set actions, a lot of tricks of the trade you learn over the years. The design piece, I always wish, and there are some more people popping up, I always wish I had a UI UX designer who understood Tableau, because obviously I don't have that design background. I kind of learn and borrow. You go to different blogs like, oh, I like that dashboard. I can utilize that design, that layout. So I do a lot of that, but I'll try to let everything drive off of, like I said, the most important thing. So if I understand they want to understand like high level KPIs at first, that's going to be the most prominent thing on the left hand side, because we as Americans, we read left to right. So those kinds of things. You learn it. Sometimes the KPI might go on the right, or sometimes you might use a lot of the white space and put it in the middle. But you want it to kind of be the most prominent thing towards the top, and then let them digest that information. Okay, I understand the KPI says X percent. Then the next thing down should inform them around like why it says that. So it's always based on something that should make sense. I don't like things that are on my dashboard that are unnecessary or that cause confusion. You're in those meetings and you're presenting it like, okay, I see a great design, but what's that number? It's like, oh, you can get,
like,
get rid of that.
They just asked for it. I don't know what that is. But they asked
right,
for it.
right.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And did they ask you to color, some random colors? Like, you add something to make it pop.
Yeah.
You're like, I guess.
No, for sure. Yeah, no,
So that's kind of
hard.
Yeah, the design piece is always I think the biggest challenge. Some people who struggle with like the data manipulation, calculations, all of that. If you have a lot of experience, then that becomes easy. Mm-hmm. The tricky piece is, because I always say Tableau design, it's really a right and left brain type of exercise, right? It's art and a science. And so a lot of people who come into analytics, everyone thinks it's all, I need to be a guru when it comes to calculations and coding and things of that nature. But the design element is sometimes what I find missing. And that's probably why you said it's hard to manage, because you give someone who's really good at SQL or Python and R or whatever a design task, and they struggle, even sometimes with guidance. So that's a piece that I think is oftentimes overlooked. And I think that's sometimes what turns people off from Tableau. It's like, oh, this is not as pretty as I would have hoped based on the demos I saw.
Yeah, and I actually think, like, especially when I'm doing like trainings and stuff, and I like, there's people from different departments, and they're like, oh, what department are you in? What department? And usually I have the people in like marketing and stuff, the people that does, those are usually the best people at Tableau. You would think it's like the SQL people, the IT people, but they're all analytics people for a reason, right? Like, they don't really think like that. It's like you said, it's the left and the right. The people that more do like graphic design and all that, they're generally more naturally gifted at Tableau than analytics people. So, which is kind of counterintuitive, right? You would think analytics people will do good in Tableau, which usually they don't. It's the other way around. So trying to find or trying to be a person that's good at both is really hard, because there's two different personality traits, really. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So yeah, the design is usually, I mean, that's why this podcast here, right? Because I mean, everyone struggles with it, and I wing the hell out of my designs. Like, I sit there just like, I never know what I'm gonna do, and I just kind of like start playing with stuff. Like, I like eyeball test everything. Like, there's no science to my designs. And so it's all play. And then sometimes like I'll just throw some random stuff in there, and I'll be like, let me see what this person thinks about this. Like just to kind of test it against different clients, because it's always, and then you kind of get stuck in your own little designs, and then you stop innovating, and you're like, man, I got to do something different. Like, I do this all the time. And then so it's a lot of it's just playing. But that is, to me, the hardest part too. And then being stuck in a way, like you said, you create templates like for your but like at a certain point, it's like, man, I'm tired of these damn templates. Like, I want something new. You know what I mean? And so like it's kind of it's hard. It's hard. It's an art. I mean, it's definitely an art. Definitely an art.
I agree.
Right, well, do you have any resources you use to kind of help you with the designs? You said you look at different websites and stuff. How do you go about that process of kind of generating new ideas?
So a lot of websites have good information. There are some bloggers, I won't name any right now, some top Tableau bloggers that I really like in terms of like the UI.
Name them. I don't mind. Mind.
Some of the top ones are like the Iron Viz winners. Some of that stuff doesn't always translate, but what it does do is kind of give me an idea of different ways to lay out certain charts and graphs, and different ways to kind of highlight those different charts and graphs with additional information. So I love the Iron Viz winners, and even the ones who compete.
Do you find, like, I don't find those helpful, like, because it's all just like random data that has nothing to do with me, and it's like, I can't give that to a client, right? Like, so it's like, I just don't pay attention to them. I mean, they're cool, like, to put on your website and stuff, but it just, they don't translate over to me. So I don't really focus on, really look at those too much. Because it's, I just don't like, I don't have time to be just doing the stuff. I don't know how they have so much time to be just playing around in Tableau and post stuff all the time. You know what I mean? So I don't have time to do that anyway. So it's like, but when I do it, I'm like, oh, that's cool. But I mean, that's nothing I can use. Like, so how do you use that to make actual business production style dashboards?
Great question. So you're right. It's more of an art. It's like that's a different story. It's like a real artistic type of infographic look. But what I do is I look at different components of it. So for example, there was one recently where they used a heat map with no numbers, but the color scheme they used was really nice. So there are certain little elements that I'm like, oh, that enhance my design versus my regular heat map. That's just like, so it's like, oh, I like how they changed the color scheme. They lightened it up. So those are the kinds of things that I use in terms of like when I actually go about it. And even when they do KPIs, it's like, okay, they actually made this number big. And I'm like, oh, how did they do that? And they're like, oh, there's a background image here that adds this little flavor. Then it's like another shape behind it. So those little elements you can incorporate. Like there was a dashboard for one client where we're like, okay, how do we now get their logo? It's not a logo. I mean, their logo includes their name, but their name is like in a cursive type font. So I'm like, okay, how do you do that? It's like, oh, well, you can actually design a background image, get their proper parameter, basically the size, the width and height of the actual dashboard you're designing. Design it. A lot of times I use PowerPoint. I tried to use Figma. Yeah. It took me too long to generate a few things in Figma. So I was like, PowerPoint is my go-to in terms of design. But essentially, I created a background image and I actually was able to replicate everything that they wanted, bringing in their logo design with that cursive font in the background image and then layering everything on top. So there are cool little techniques that I've seen used. And I'm like, oh, it's basically a puzzle where people take little components, they design each little component, and then they build it into a view. To your point, a lot of that is not appreciated when it comes to your clients. They might overlook it, or sometimes they might not even like it. It's like you spent 3 days working on this beautiful design in your mind, and they're like, "We don't want none of it." It's like so that.
Yeah, I don't do none of that stuff. I mean, like I don't think I've ever used a background image for my project. I mean, unless somebody like asks for it, but I never thought, oh, let me do a background image. I mean, it's just a lot of time. You know what I mean? It's just like I just don't know how much value it really gives. You know what I mean? Like if it's going to be something like they're posting on their website or the front page or something, like all right, yeah, but like just doing that just to do it, I just don't see the value of it. You know what I mean? So like when you're actually creating your business dashboards, do you just do it when somebody asks you, or do you actually like, oh, I'm gonna do this, and this with this background image? How often do you use background image?
So I don't use background images often. There is only really one good use case that I had with a client where I used the background image, and it was pretty cool. I won't be too long-winded. Essentially, they wanted a custom heat map with specific colors for certain sections, and then they wanted a 0 for where the data was basically blank or null. So within the background image, basically, I put zeros on every square, and then basically made the squares full, basically color them the right color based on some calculation logic.
So that solving a problem.
Yeah. So
that wasn't you didn't go in there looking like I'm going to create this background image.
No,
like you're using it to solve something.
Right. The only other time I actually use images is really for like custom buttons. Now you have the navigation inside of Tableau, so I'll go in and create like custom buttons inside of like PowerPoint, and then upload those and things like that. But none of the stuff that you see on IRViz I've used for a client.
Yeah. And I'm amazed how much time they got. You know what I mean? That's I don't know how they do that. But yeah, I mean they're pretty cool for sure. Pretty cool. All right, so best practices, or it doesn't have to be best practices. People don't like that term, but like, what are your must dos when it comes to dashboards? Like stuff that has to be done. Like if you're giving it to probably your templates, you know what I mean? Like you're giving your templates, like it's like every dashboard has to have this. Like what are those?
Every dashboard, every workbook needs to hide all unused sheets. That's number one. I always say something that a lot of people overlook and don't always appreciate: change the default tooltips. That's one of the things that I always recommend. I always can tell in my mind the level of Tableau developer based on the way their tooltips are utilized and the way they look, because you can do a lot with the tooltips. So those are some of the things that I think are probably less often talked about.
What you do with your tooltips? Because I don't mess with my tooltips. So what you do with your tooltips?
You have to change the font. You have to change the font. Yeah, and then even something as simple as centering your tooltips changes the look and feel when people hover over it. So making certain things bold, changing certain colors, simple things. Because you know how it'll just line everything up, left aligned, and it'll drop.
But I mean, it does look nice, but I don't think I've ever had anybody be like, "Hey, I want this tooltip to look better." So
that's because it's subtle.
Is it that you want it, or that the client want it? You know, if anybody asking for it. Then it must be something you need to do.
It's funny, right? Because when you deal with clients, they just don't know in many cases. It's almost like someone who's trying to evaluate art. And it's like, okay, I don't really do art, but I know it looks nice. And then you can appreciate certain subtleties that the artist did if you actually grow to appreciate it. It's like, wow, I noticed that he did this, and it's subtle.
All right, but advocate there.
Go for
it. If you can make a painting that takes 10 hours and make $1 million on it, or you can make another painting that takes 100 hours and make the same $1 million on it, why are you gonna spend that extra 90 hours for no reason?
Great question. And I think it really boils down to doing it for the art. The artist spends that extra time because
but you ain't making money doing that either.
You're right. And a lot of times, I'll just put it from my perspective. It has less to do with the client and more to do with, it's like that person who's like, okay, it looks good. It's like, nah, I still want to make one more tweak. I think that's me. I'm just guilty. If people are like, it looks great, I'm like, yeah, but I need to change this and change that. I want to make. So it's probably perfectly fine to not make certain adjustments.
So just don't tell your clients you bill them extra 20 hours for just clean up their tooltips that they didn't want. But I understand. There, like you said, it's very personal when it comes to the dashboards. Like I said, that's why I haven't really outsourced much, because it's like, no, this is my baby. So a lot of it is like, there's certain, like I said, certain things that you got to do. Like, I don't care if my client wants it or not, I'm doing this.
Yep.
So I get it. All right. So tooltips is one. What else?
What else in terms of using containers strategically? So that's another best practice I do. If you're going to have things, you want to make sure that they have the appropriate, what is it called, symmetry. Basically, you're looking and saying, okay, I want these two worksheets side by side. Sometimes people will just use the tile, but I always like to use the container and then actually distribute evenly. But then you can actually use multiple containers. So I like to do that. If I'm using even filters, I like to put those inside of containers, parameters as well. A lot of the tips and tricks are really going to be, based on preference. I mean, those are some of the things that I think about off the top of my head in terms of design. Yeah.
Yeah, everybody has their little to-dos,
And there's a long list of little things that probably fall in the realm of the tooltip, because even with the super subtle.
You love that tooltip, huh? The only time you see tooltips is when you hover over something and you spend all your time on that.
Just in case someone hovers. So there are other little tips and tricks in terms of how you actually set up your filter names. Things like that you can do is you can actually add a little space, before each title on your actual filter.
We're talking about the tooltip still?
No, on the actual filter. So it's something that people don't notice, but it's the titles are.
No, say that again, because I missed that part. So we're talking about the quick filters.
On the quick filters, the actual default titles are all the way on the left. They're a little too far to the left. So if you add a little space before the actual title, it adds a little element. So it's little details. All right. Another thing I like to do is group my filters with filters and parameters with parameters. So if you actually are using parameters and filters, I don't put them in the same container. I also like to shade the container that my filters are in so that it kind of stands out. Another thing I like to do is if I have different worksheets, I make the background of my dashboard lighter typically, and then I'll actually make my actual worksheets white and then give them a nice light border around them so that they pop a little more.
So you said dash, what color? Like a light gray or something, or
like a light gray, and then you actually have white worksheets that sit out, they stand out more on top of that. So those are some of the things I do. And then all the other things are really around opacity, or you can actually change the transparency of the actual color. So I always reduce the color from, let's just say 100% down to 90. And it does something in terms of making it easier to kind of look at. It's one of the things that I learned early on. Yeah. Because sometimes I was like, my colors, they're too harsh. So dialing back the colors. And then when you have certain bar graphs and even some of your scatter plots, adding a nice little border around them so that they stand out more, it makes a difference in my opinion. And then also there are sites where I look for like color palettes, but I always base it on the company logo. So it's like, okay, what are the complementary colors to this actual logo color? And then if they don't have, in many cases they don't, unless you're working with marketing like you mentioned, they don't have like a style guide. So you're like, okay, I'm going to give you all some standards so that actually is on brand and actually goes along with your theme. So those are some of.
I pretty much have to do that with all my clients. It's just me winging it, you know. Like, like I said, I'll grab there's usually one primary color in the logo, and then I use like Palatine and just do like a color scheme. But there's no science. It's like, I don't like this color. Let me change the shading a little bit, and then I kind of figure it out. So it starts with science, but then it ends with eyeballing it.
Absolutely.
So it's like if it looks good to me, I think my eyes are perfect and it'll look good to them. That's how I think.
You're not alone. You're not alone at all.
Yeah. All right, cool. So you went to the next one, was like the tips and tricks. Anything else than there? But I mean, you already gave a lot.
In terms of tips and tricks for like dashboard design.
Yeah.
Not necessarily for design. I'll say this, a lot of my dashboards are really functional dashboards. I think the designs are pretty cool. I mean, I could show a lot of different dashboards, but they're all functional. So a lot of my tips and tricks are really focused on functionality for the client, trying to make my dashboards perform more like an application. And I'll show that in a little bit, but I think that's really.
Yeah, let's show it then. Let's see it. I'm curious. I want to look at all your lines too. Your lines better be perfect too. Talking.
They may not be. Yeah. Can you see it?
Yeah.
You can see my screen.
I want to see the tooltips first. Let's see the tooltips. All right. Got some double space in there. See, I did do Senate style tooltip, but to me it's like, yes, it's cool, but like I said, it's just the clients have never said something, and I'm just always out of time. So I'm like, all right, if they don't care, then I don't care. Like you got to kind of like let go. But I do agree, they do look better for sure.
I appreciate it. So I'm going to start from the beginning with this dashboard because there's, like I said, I'm always about the functionality, and I'll try not to be so long-winded. But did it go full screen for you as well?
Yep.
Hope so. Okay, cool. So essentially, what I wanted to do was design a splash page. So, like I said, it's about making it easy for someone to come in and get comfortable with what it is you're presenting. So this was designed basically off of the Superstore sales data to allow people to understand market share. So let's just say I want to focus in on a specific manufacturer, and we'll just say Apple. Everyone's familiar with Apple. So now once you select that manufacturer, splash page goes away, and now you can actually focus in on what's happening. The next thing is, okay, if I understand we're looking at Apple, what category is Apple in? What's the subcategory? Okay, we're looking at technology and phones. But off the rip, you actually see the market share overall, right? For the category and subcategory, it's everything. So it's going to be super low. But if I want to zero in on technology, okay, that's the market share for Apple, just looking at technology. But obviously, we're looking at a subcategory. So if I want to drill down a little lower, and that's why you see the 1, 2, 3. So now we're all the way where we need to be. If I want to look at Apple in terms of like the market share of that actual subcategory. And then you can actually hover and you'll see the tooltip updates to actually give you additional context for what Apple's market share is, the Apple market share overall, then also in a specific region. And then just in terms of like technology phone sales nationally. So you have...
How do you do the color legend? What's the little trick you did there? That's not regular.
Definitely not. So you have some floating, but essentially the way I do a lot of things is using a combination of table counts, and then you actually can use aliases. So if I were to actually go into the actual worksheet, you'll see the trick there. So I don't know if you want to do that now or we could do it later.
Is that legend? Oh, okay. Yeah, I haven't seen this. Let's see this.
Yeah, so it's basically you're just using a square, and then you're actually just splitting it
That's
out
pretty
based
cool.
on
Okay.
yeah.
And then
So
it's just like a highlight table with a quick table calc.
You got it.
Oh, that's badass. Yeah, no, I haven't seen that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, appreciate it. So a lot of it is like you said, just layering different things that you know into something that actually becomes useful. So we have our high level map in terms of, like I said, we start at the top, we drill in 1, 2, 3, and now we have an idea of what's happening. But if I want to see what's happening in the Southwest, all I need to do is click on it, and now it takes me to a dashboard that actually gives me a lot more information around what's happening in the Southwest. Who are the other competitors?
How do you like guide somebody with this? Because like if so you just gave that to someone, I don't think they would know how to use this functionality. So how do you do this as far as giving it to them? Do you have a meeting and talk to them through it, or do you
absolutely
have instructions?
So that's a good question. So essentially, this was designed based on a number of meetings with a client. We actually talked through what it is they wanted to do, how they wanted it to use it, how they wanted it to function. So this wasn't something that was a quick build at all. And it took a while to actually get to an end state. So this is a replica in terms of like how to do it with Superstore sales data. But imagine having multiple meetings to kind of zero in on, okay, what questions are you trying to answer, to actually get down to the point where we're actually able to show them all of this information. Because obviously you can use it, once again, you see the tooltips, they look clean.
Yep.
You know, but you can actually click on a state, and it'll update for each state to tell you what the market share for Apple is. And then you see it's a little subtle things, right? You have Apple in blue, and then you have the competitive set, which is gray. But it's basically saying we're focusing on what Apple's market share is versus a competitive set. You can see the competitive set here. And then if you switch to the metrics, you can...
What, that red background, is that like a heat map in the back type of thing?
So it's basically a dual axis. So you just make the square in the, in the front smaller so that it actually shows. And then you actually set it to basically be red whenever the actual metric matches.
So where do you get like those kind of ideas from?
Like you said, it's just it's something that so basically the client asked and said, okay, how do we know what we're looking at? Because before everything was blue. But for each of these, this is sales, this is customers, this is traffic. And I was like, well, if you want to highlight it, they're like, yeah, it'd be nice if we could color around it. As soon as they said that, I'm like, okay, you can definitely do that because that's a dual axis, right? Yeah. Now it's a matter of how do you actually change the color based on the selection. I'm using a parameter here. So I was like, okay, I need the parameter to equal whatever is present here. Yeah. So,
and then, like the hard part is like when somebody says that, like you can't Google that, right? Like you gotta creatively think through that. And that's where like a lot of people get stuck. It's just like this stuff that you do in Tableau, you can't Google it. Like it's not something you can. Oh, how do I do this? You got to know enough to think through it. So I think there's a huge jump between just people that are good at Tableau and people that are great. Like it's just like once you get all those skills, like you can pretty much think through anything. But there's a huge gap to me because like a lot of my contracts is like, all right, we paid somebody, didn't work out, so now you fix it, right? I'm like, Tableau. Yeah, Tableau's not one of those things where you can just like outsource to anybody. Yeah, they may have all the certifications in the world. They can still suck at it. Like it's like you could. I mean, it's sad that like I'm kind of assholes in my trainings. I'm like, some of y'all gonna be really good at this, and some of y'all gonna suck at this. Don't feel bad because you can learn this as much as you want. If you don't got it, you don't got it. Like, but it's true. Like, it's like you got it or you don't got it. It's not. You can learn this all day and night, and you can still be not good at it compared to someone just as naturally can problem solve through and be creative and all that, and they can pick it up in a month. Like, it's one of those crazy products. But which is good for us because we could charge a lot because it's something that not everyone can learn. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you can't outsource overseas generally, and people that aren't here, it's like I said, either you're great or you get decent stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Cool. No, this is cool for sure. All right. So, anything that you can think of that people don't focus enough on I know you said tooltips. I feel like tooltips is about to be an answer. But,
no, not at all. Not at all. I think the one thing that people don't focus on enough, and tooltips is just like a small thing. I think is the functionality within Tableau. I think that's one thing that's oftentimes overlooked. I don't see a lot of people utilizing the functionality. And I think
functionality. Talk a little more in that. What do you mean by functionality?
I'm glad you asked. So there's a lot happening just in this screen in terms of functionality is concerned. So there's so much more I think people could do if they actually focused on functionality. For example, right, we clicked on the filter on the map to zero in on the southwest. You notice how this is set now to the southwest.
Yep.
I can switch it to all. So something as simple as that, that's functionality.
Yep.
Now people might ask, okay, so how do you do something like that? I'm not going to spend time going over that. But then also more functionality down here. You actually have the national average as a circle. That's set. Obviously, the national average is going to be equal to what you see here. But also the national average will stay the same if I go to the southeast. And now you'll see the red circle move. Whereas before it was actually sitting right where it should have been, which is the same value as the bar at the national level. Now it's still sitting at the right spot. It's just different because we're comparing it now to the southeast. That's more functionality.
Question: do you do a lot of like multiple actions? I tend to just do one. I don't like I said. It might be like I said. I'm trying to get the dashboard of the clients, and it just don't have time to just kind of try to do a whole bunch of extra necessary stuff. But do you do like maybe like you click this and then it does an action here, then a different action there, then a highlight there, then a parameter? Like, do you like put multiple actions together?
I do. So it's a combination of actions, just regular dashboard actions, but you also have parameter actions. And then there's also an understanding of level of detail calculations.
Yeah.
So I haven't seen a lot of people talk about it, but if you have a good grasp of dashboard actions, parameter actions, level of detail calcs, table calculations, then I think it opens up a world of functionality in Tableau that most people don't utilize.
Yeah. But do you do it in your production style dashboards?
All the time. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So everything you see here is dynamic to a certain degree, even down here, which is cut off because I guess basically the display on this computer.
Yeah.
But essentially, you have a lot of things happening that are only able to happen based on the way I design certain level of detail calculations to grab certain values, and then utilizing certain table calculations to make sure only certain things are displayed, and then knowing and understanding how to do certain parameter actions and things of that nature so that you get certain selections to appear appropriately. So I think
do they ask you that, or you do that? Because like I have the problem of balancing the functionality and what, you know, like you said, all that stuff, and then overcomplicating it, because I feel like if I do that type of stuff and all this stuff starts moving and changing, like the end user, like their brain just blows up. They're like, what the hell just happened? All this stuff moving. Right. And so like I try to keep my things a little more simpler because of the end users, but like I want to do cool things like this, right? But it depends on the user a lot. You know, like it sounds like the person you build this for, they knew what they wanted and they were like, but a lot of times like it's just a dashboard that just 100 people go look at, and I can't have a whole bunch of complexity to it because it, like I said, it's just a random person logging in and looking at it, and they're like, what the hell is all of this, you know? So how do you balance that with like creating all these cool, like I said, multiple action things, and then the user end experience with the complexity of it?
That's a great question. So I think it depends on your client. And like you said, the request for this particular dashboard came from someone who was more experienced with Tableau, knew what was possible. Difference. So you build for your client. But I will say, and I'll give you another example if we have a little bit of time.
Yeah.
Switch switch to another view.
I lost your audio.
How about now? Can you hear me?
Yep, you're good now.
All right, cool.
All right, cool. Yep.
Can you see this dashboard?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. But essentially, what you build for your client. But I'll say many clients don't know what they don't know, and what's possible in Tableau really depends on how well you can utilize the functionality. Yeah. And here's another example, really quick, of just using functionality inside of Tableau. I wish everything displayed appropriately, but that's okay.
That's cool.
So we talked about COVID and the impact of some things.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just first look at the trend graph, right? We have a trend, and then we want to say, okay, we see some things are happening. Can we show key dates? Right now it's off, but if we turn it on, you see this is when the first U.S. COVID case happened, and you see a number of different dates, key dates, when stimulus payments were started, et cetera. So that's the first step. Then if you want to look at, everything doesn't really matter. The point is the functionality. If I want to look at the U.S. overall, it's all based on the index, right? So one is going to be what you're looking at. Look at, as you add different states, you want to replace what was there, and then you want to maybe rank whatever else you actually select. So being able to do something like this inside of Tableau, where it actually functions like an agent, is something that many people don't necessarily do, but I think people could do a lot more with Tableau if they understood how to do stuff like this. And then you can actually reset the view and you can start all over. So numbers and things aren't as important. I think the idea that I wanted to kind of show is with Tableau, I think it really just depends on how comfortable are you with utilizing different calculations in conjunction with one another so that you can get more out of the tool. Because I always think of Tableau as a dashboarding tool, sure, but it's one of those things that you can really build out analytic, what I call applications, like something that's dynamic, that operates, that functions, and gives users answers almost on demand versus, hey, here's what happened last year, here's what happened last week. It's okay. Well, what happens if I do this? You know, it's like, okay, well, you can do that in Tableau. You know, you can do your what if scenarios, and you can filter for this and go. It should be fluid, is what I always think. And many times it's real clunky because it's like, well, we can't do that. You know, it's like, yes, you can. They have animations now in Tableau. Mm-hmm. Yes, you can. They have different functionality that people may not be aware of. So, okay, well, how do you use level of detail calcs in conjunction with, you know, some of these parameter actions so I can get additional data? You can do drive time analysis in Tableau. You can do, you know, builder footprints in Tableau. You can do migration in Tableau. You can do a whole host of things. You make data prep work first. But once you have the data prep, it's so many things I could show you that might change the way you look at Tableau, I would think, I would hope. And you might say, oh, wow, I never thought about offering something like that. So I'll give you an example. I talked to some friends of mine who are actually software engineers. They use, you know, D3JS. They use a whole host of libraries. And I showed them one of my applications. They're like, it would have taken us a year to build this. Using JavaScript.
Same. I have a client that I build the interface in Tableau, and then they give it to their software people, and they replicate it, and so they use Tableau as like a demo like template, and they give it to their clients, and then they see if it works. If it works, then they give it a software and implement, because it's easier to build it, have me build in Tableau as a prototype, and then before they actually build it.
There you go.
So yeah,
like rapid prototyping with interactive.
Yep.
Oh, exactly. So that's a conversation I would love to have. We could talk about it, because I have some ideas of where things might go. Think about it like this. I'll say this and I'll be quiet. I think about Tableau like Netflix before, you know, streaming became, you know, super popular. Things were slow. It may not have felt like it was going to be, you know, possible. Tableau is still somewhat slow. Imagine Tableau actually being able to process larger sets of data and the interactions and the actions being a lot quicker, smoother, seamless.
Yeah.
What kind of questions will we be able to answer on the fly, and what kind of dashboards will we want to then build? That's how I'm thinking about Tableau.
Yeah.
Will we go there? We'll see. But that's what gets me excited.
Nice. All right, man. Well, we appreciate you on. You gave us a lot of good tips.
I appreciate you having me. This was good. We'll have to do this again.
Right. It was just fun, right?
Yeah.
This is great for marketing too. So it's like I enjoy doing this, and people get value from it. They get the tips. I get tips. Like that's why I'm looking like, hey, how you do that one?
Right.
It's good for everybody. All right, man.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it.
All right. Take care.